10:20. Andrew Urquhart with you on the program today. And look, it's undeniable that the internet has got some dodgy stuff on it. I think that's established, and it is perhaps not appropriate for some of that stuff to be on there at all, and particularly for children to have access to that. But there's kind of this false dichotomy which says that in order to keep children safe on the internet, that we need to give up some basic freedoms and put in a whole bunch of regulation that not only regulates who's allowed on the internet, but what's allowed on the internet. And there's been some toing and froing on this one, and honestly, I'm a little bit confused. Is the government planning on banning social media for under 16s? Has it dropped that plan? Are they doing it? So, look, we'll get an understanding of this. Joining me on the program now from Pillar Protecting Individual Life, Liberty and Rights, Arian Tashakkori. Kia ora. Welcome to the program today.
Kia ora. Good morning.
Can you give us a breakdown of this? Is this something the government's planning on doing? Is the opposition planning on doing it, and they're campaigning on it? Have they just changed their mind and they're not going to do this anymore? Where are we at with this?
Yeah, I'll paint a general picture of what's been going on since last year. There's been almost a three-tier approach that the government has kind of established in dealing with this issue of online harms. One of those has been a members' bill, a National Party members' bill that essentially looks to ban social media for under 16s, and that looks, as it says in the bill, to copy what the Australians have done. Mm-hmm. That was one. At the same time, there was an ACT Party-initiated select committee inquiry into the harms that young people face online and the role of society and businesses and communities to deal with that. Yep. And that released a report just a few weeks ago. And then thirdly, the Prime Minister had commissioned the Education Minister with the job of coming up with a policy to look at, well, how do we deal with the harms that young people face online? So those were three different approaches that essentially had a similar aim. Mm-hmm. The Select Committee came back with a report and discussed that report in the House last week on Wednesday. And what's happened essentially is there's a bit of a technicality in the House, in Parliament, where you can't have two pieces of legislation that look to do the same thing. Yep. You just want one. And so the National Party's members' bill has been removed and put back in favour of a government bill or a government approach to dealing with the harms that young people face online. So it seems as though there is going to be some policy to deal with the harms that young people face online, but it seems to be broader than just banning social media at this point. It seems to have gone much bigger. So,
hey, one thing to say, let's protect young people from that, although that gets complicated in terms of digital ID and proving who the young people are and how easy is that to hack, to a more broad approach to say, hey, let's filter the internet for the nation. Let's see if we can get the nasties out. Let's put some regulations and some consequences in there, and a discussion broadly in the House as this was debated. And interesting, this seems to be from across the political spectrum of saying we need some type of regulation, we need some type of government-sanctioned watchdog to say what's in and what's out, what's acceptable, what's not.
That's right. Well, it seems as though many of our politicians have seen what the Australians have done in banning social media and come to the conclusion that actually, as in their own words, it's not a silver bullet because it essentially doesn't work. A lot of the numbers coming out is that, well, kids are using VPNs and putting on masks and pretending to be older than they are, and they're still largely on the internet. So what's happened is that they've said, look, we'll ban social media, we'll have a policy that implements that, but actually, because that won't work, we'll probably need even broader systems of regulation. Now, the specificities of that have not come out. We don't know what that will look like ultimately. But across the House, bar one party, and just with the notable exception of the ACT Party, and during the debate, the Māori Party wasn't present, so we don't know where they sit on the issue. But broadly, most parties across the House are in favour of some sort of state-run online regulator. And we have severe, obviously, concerns around that.
And obviously, whilst Parliament is agreeing on this issue, because who wouldn't agree on the broad premise of keeping children safe and making the internet a less dangerous place for them, but I'm sure they've got very different opinions as to who the regulator should be and what type of stuff should be filtered out. I mean, there's quite there'll be different opinions depending on people's political points of view on this one, I imagine.
Oh, certainly. But what ultimately happens, and we've seen this happen in the UK and in Europe, is that you have these extremely vague words like misinformation, disinformation, safety, and harm
Yeah.
that basically every party agrees on. No one likes harm. No one likes, an unsafe environment. That establish these state regulators of the internet. But ultimately, over time, the definitions of harm change with different unelected bureaucrats being in those positions.
Yep.
And as we've seen in the UK and places like Europe, because these terms are so malleable, they will ultimately be used to silence people who have differing opinions to these bureaucrats who believe that what I say is harmful to the masses. And it's not a targeted approach that deals with specific harms, that deals with truly illegal content. No one disagrees that illegal content exists and should be dealt with. But when you have these extremely vague subjective terms, unelected people come in and not only use but abuse that power.
This is the concern, and look, I don't want to be alarmist in this regard. We don't want to immediately dust off our copies of George Orwell and have this dystopian future where the government controls what we're allowed to say and think and all those sorts of things. But it is the uncertainty of this. It is moving into an area where the government seeks to regulate something which, up until now, there's been a certain amount of freedom and privacy in this space. In order to regulate, some of that privacy and freedom will need to be sacrificed. And honestly, we're in an election year at the moment, but we don't seem to be having public conversations. It's okay for the politicians to debate it in Parliament, but nobody seems to be campaigning on this. No political party says this is specifically what will happen so that people can engage in the democratic process around what's been proposed.
Yeah, there's a lot of vagaries, and so we're waiting for the actual policy to come out, and so that we can comment on it more substantively. But just on your comment on not wanting to be alarmist, of course we don't want to be alarmist. But just in the past year or 18 months, we've seen the likes of the BSA, which is an unelected government, agency, come out and say that an online podcaster can't say words like mumbo jumbo and looking to discipline him. Now, whether you like what he said or not, the fact that there is an unelected body looking to regulate the online world is just one example. And thankfully that the decision has been made that was an inappropriate exercise of their rights. In another sense, we've also had the HDCA, the Harmful Digital Communications Act, is another policy that looks to deal with, initially it looked to deal with online harm, online bullying, but it's been used, because of the way it was worded, to silence dissent, but used by those in positions of power and authority to silence those who are trying to keep them accountable, and also being used to engage in foreign interference by powers outside of New Zealand. Yeah,
it's actually being used to bully people from foreign agents, which is
right.
Super ironic. With the BSA aspect, I mean, this is a tricky one because the government had said, we're scrapping the BSA, in part because some overreach perhaps in them wanting to regulate the internet. But be careful what you pray for, Arian, because the regulation for both broadcasters and internet content may be, a stronger, more draconian version of what we're getting rid of.
Oh, certainly. And so we should be careful to not celebrate the disestablishment of the BSA too much, because, nature hates a vacuum, and once you kick one out, you might have something bigger and quote unquote better, worse, in place. And so there is a real threat that something will come in place that will regulate the online world that is extremely subjective in the way it enforces those rules. And we don't realize the necessity and the power of free speech until it's almost too late, or until we're in a crisis. We might not feel how important free speech might be today, but in the moment of crisis, and we've seen that in the past, say, 6 years, when an unelected body has control over what is justifiable speech and what is unjustifiable speech, that's when we realize maybe what we've lost.
It is good that it is being debated in Parliament. There's some concerns there, but this is, again, we are in a democracy. We can have our say, and great to have organisations like yourself shining a light on this type of stuff. But if basically the plan is, hey, we had a plan to follow what was happening in England and Australia, which isn't working, so we're going to have something even more pervasive than that. Honestly, it doesn't seem to be tracking in a positive direction, but at least we can have our say, and I know that Pillar and other organisations will be making sure that we have some robust debates about the potential consequences of an internet regulator.
100%. We've been following this since the middle of last year, and we said early on that, look, these policies that look to ban social media for under 16s will inevitably turn into policies that want to regulate the internet. And so we've been following this, and we'll continue to follow it. And once the policy comes out in a more substantive form, we'll be able to comment more specifically. But as it stands, we are just raising concerns about an online regulator like those that we've seen in Europe and the UK, which, quite frankly, don't have the best free speech in the world necessarily.
Don't have free speech and don't solve the actual problem the legislation was created for. Encourage people to keep informed. PillarNZ.org for more information. Arian, thanks for your time today.
Thanks so much.